sound is speeding.
That button's not working.
I just hit the side button, should be fine.
There we go. Speed on both.
Okay, cool. So, James, let's just start off warm ups. Just introduce yourself, who you are and what you are to the wrestling community.
My name is James Shadowe. Worked as a professional wrestler back in the 80s and mid 90s. Started in the industry through Mondo Guerrero. Met Mondo Guerrero at I think it was a convention of some sort, and I basically told him, I said, sir, I'm a big fan of yours. I grew up watching you and your family. I would love to be a professional wrestler. And Mondo said to me, that's great, kid, and he walked away. So my heart was broken, and I was walking outside of the convention, and he walked back up to me, and he says, hey, kid, sorry about that, but if you want to be a wrestler, meet me at this address on Monday. So I came to this place, and it was a gym in East LA, and we worked out of an old garage, and I learned how to be a professional wrestler through Mondo Guerrero. And then in the midst of my career, or my journey as a professional wrestler, I connected with a lot of people in the industry, one being Jesse Hernandez and Bill Anderson, Wrestling School of Hard Knocks. To continue my career and to move forward and kind of evolve, I started working out with these guys and training with them and training with their kids and the guys that they were working or teaching at the time, and started working shows, independent shows throughout the West Coast or Western region, and we did some great things. We did some great, incredible things working with Jesse Hernandez and Bill Anderson. The Wrestling School of Hard Knocks played a real big part in my life as a professional wrestler and in my life personally as I pursued my career. Friends for life. More so Jesse Hernandez. Jesse has probably been one of the most loyal people I've ever known in this business. He's introduced me to many opportunities throughout my 20 plus years or whatever in wrestling, and he kind of like helped me on my path. Can tell you many instances where we worked together. One that was probably the biggest highlight for me was we worked a show in Laughlin, and it was me versus the Savage, and who was it? Ricky Ataki, Louis Spicoli, Stephen DeLeon, and many other guys, Cincinnati Red and Bobby Bradley. We were all on this card in Laughlin, Nevada. And during that time, it was like the second or third match in, the ring ropes broke. The post broke. The post actually broke, and the ropes became flimsy. And so my match was up next, and I was wrestling the Savage. And they tried to put it together and tape it together, what have you. And we got in the ring, and I worked off of the ropes, most of the stuff that I did. A lot of innovative things that people didn't do or do now. But so I jumped on the second ropes, and the ropes just really just like gave. And it was like, we can't continue this match the way we did. So we went to a straight to the finish, DDT to the Savage, and it was over. But the coolest part about that was what happened afterwards. It was Louis Spicoli versus Ricky Ataki and their match next. And they got in the ring, and they worked the ring for about 2 minutes. And then from there, Jesse was like, out of the ring, out of the ring. So these guys went and started brawling outside of the ring, brawled outside, and then the brawl just kept going into the, what's that, Nevada River, whatever that river was, in where's the city? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
I can pick back up right from
just say the river.
The river. So Louis and Ricky were in the ring, and at the time the ring was just done. So Jesse gave signal for them to come outside the ring and continue their match. So these guys rolled out the ring and started working the crowd, and then they rolled outside, and then these guys ended up in the river, and stuff just went crazy. Next thing you know, the locker room was just like poured out. Everybody came in and they started brawling. It became a brawl at the river, and people were jumping in the ring. Guys were jumping into the river, and it was just crazy. It was probably one of the most highlighted moments of working shows with these guys, because you never know what would happen, and it was just adapting, you know. So that was cool. That was really cool. And throughout my time as a wrestler, there was a point where I just said, you know what, that's it, I'm done. I think I'm going to go as far as I can go. And actually, It was a tour that they had set. Jesse had set a tour, and it was going to be like a 6-month tour. And I had to make a decision to either continue my career, and at the time I was about to have my first kid, so I decided to stay. The rest of the guys like Louie and I think RVD and a bunch of other guys went on this tour, and the careers blossomed after that. But I stayed. So I decided to kind of move in a different direction, and I started a radio show, Squared Circle Talk on Pro Wrestling. And I started on AM 870 KIEV. I used to come on Saturdays. No, I used to come on after George Putnam. And after doing that show, I got a call from a guy from Mike Horn from Cable Radio Network, and he asked me if I wanted to cover for Dynamite D for a show. So I said, okay, sure, no problem. And it was a national syndicated radio show on cable TV. So it was CRN cable radio was one of those things where you either knew about it or you didn't, or you discovered it by turning channels. So I then started Top Wrestling, to talk on pro wrestling, Squared Circle. And once I started doing the radio show, it became popular. I took over the 2 hours, and it was a weekly show that grew and expanded. We were doing ratings because it was Nielsen ratings, like Howard Stern. We were on the same night, Friday nights, at I think it was 8 to 10, and then we were 9 to 11, and we were competing with Howard Stern, so it was a very popular show. So in the process of doing a radio show, I started calling up my contacts. So I called Mondo. I said, Mondo, you got to check out my show. It's really good. And Mondo was like, kid, I don't know, man. That radio stuff, man, and wrestling private, he's old school. So it was like, then I called Jesse. I said, Jesse, come down anytime. Check out the show. I want you to be on. I want you to be a guest. He was like, okay, bro, I'll check it out, Shadow. Okay, Shadow, sounds good, Shadow. And then all the time, it's okay, Shadow. All right, go check it out. So Jesse came on the show, and he saw what it was. He saw the platform that it was, and he was all in. So we started doing interviews with a lot of other guys from it. I had Louis Spicoli was a big supporter of the show. Louis went on to go to WCW and become a stamp as one of the best jobbers in the industry. Back then in the 80s, we were jobbers that would go on TV and job for all the big stars. And Louis worked with some of the biggest and the brightest and the best. So did Stefan and Ricky Ataki and some of the other guys. But Louis was that standout guy. And this is a guy that Jesse and Bill invested their time and energy in. And he became such a great success because of what he learned and all the things that he did with Wrestling School of Hard Knocks. Him moving on and becoming a star, he was like one of those highlighted guys that always came back to Hard Knocks, always worked with the guys and the kids and giving them advice on what to do and what not to do. And he always came on the radio show, and he would co-host with me, and then there were times where we were doing events with WCW, and Louis was right there, you know what I mean? So it was some cool moments, some great moments, and he even covered and hosted the show for me a couple of times and stuff. So I think we had a Wrestling School of Hard Knocks takeover, and like a bunch of the guys came in and did the radio show. So we had some great moments, man. Stuff that I don't think I'll ever forget. One of the best parts was when you look back at all the guys that made it in this industry, and you can look at Chris Daniels, you can look at Kazarian and these guys, and they find their way back. Eventually they find their way back, but Louis was that guy that always came back, man. He always had the time for you, and he was at the pinnacle point of like his career blossoming. He was gonna face Larry Zbyszko, but then he passed away, and that was a hard moment, man. It was a sorry, sad, or sorry. I was sorry, and I was sad, and I was really just heartbroken. And we did tributes to Louis on the radio show. Jesse's done some tributes to Louis, and we won't forget him, because he's one of those guys that made it, and one of those guys that didn't forget where he came from. And I think that was one of the plus pieces about this guy, his personality. It speaks volume when a person becomes successful and don't forget where they come from. And that's one of the key things about Jesse that I love about him, and I got mad respect for him because he never forgets you. No matter what you do, no matter where you come from, even if you screw up, he'll still give you a second chance, a third chance, and he'll always just give you advice and put you aside. Look, kid, you gotta get your stuff together here. It's like, I'm gonna work with you, I'm gonna help you, man, but come on, brother. you know, and even when there's been several times where I've seen Jesse and a kid didn't have the money to pay for his wrestling lessons, and they weren't expensive, but he just didn't have any money. Kids were sleeping in their cars. Jesse would find a way to get him a hotel or find him a place to stay, and Jesse would teach him for free. And he always says, he says, God bless me, it'll all come back around. And that's one of the things about when you look at guys like Jesse, old school, Mondo Guerrero, old school, these guys never forgot. And they never forget where they came from, and they always had their heart open to teach and the craft of wrestling, and for you to be as successful as you possibly can. Mondo treated me the same way when I was broke and I was down and out, and he was like, come on, kid, you keep working, keep training. And that was the same thing with Jesse. It's like, Shadowe, just come on in, and just keep working. And I just kept working and it kept pushing, man. So I never forgot them, and I always included them in the radio show. And Jesse never forgot me. He always included me in any and everything that he had or he made available. Opportunity came with a film that was very popular called Beyond the Mat. And Beyond the Mat was, Jesse had called me and says, hey, you know what, I talked to Barry Blaustein about you, and he wants to come in and interview you about the radio show. Touching on, you know, independent wrestling and everything, and then what part did my show, the radio show, play in wrestling during that time and that era. So he came in and he sat down, and I was 100% in character. I was Shadow Man, and, you know, Shadow this and Shadow that and Shadow, and it was 100% kayfabe. So he's like, thanks a lot, appreciate the time, and moved on. So that opportunity I let slip away from me, but other opportunities came. Got introduced for, I can't remember the guy's name, but for the World Wrestling Peace Festival. The World Wrestling Peace Festival was probably one of the biggest moments in wrestling history that gets very little recognition for people's careers. It was an idea to bring together all of the people in the wrestling industry into one stage, in one match, in one ring, in one show, and show unity and community. And I thought it was a genius idea, it was a great idea, and it was a great opportunity for a lot of guys to be highlighted and basically do an audition for the bigwigs. I worked with the ambassadors from Japan and Antonio Inoki. When I got this introduction, I was trying to figure out, okay, what do you want from me? Okay, you want to do radio? You want to advertise radio? You want to promote a radio? And this guy was like green, 100% green. And it was like, Jesse was just like, hey, Shadowe, just see what you can do with him or for him and see what happens. I'm like, okay, cool. All right, we'll see what's up. So when we sat down and we went through everything, Antonio Inoki was supposed to be the main event for this show, and there was an opportunity to set a pace and set a trend that would really revolutionize wrestling in the 90s, the mid-90s. And when that moment came, they was like, no, we're not going to do this. This is ridiculous. Why would we do this? And I'm like, wait, no, you got to. He says, well, I need you to present to them and explain to them that this should happen, should take place. So I had an opportunity to pitch to these guys, and I had one small moment to convince delegates, senators, and Inoki himself that this is a great idea. And I had to do it at the airport. LAX, running LAX, I had like numbers, stats, and Hulk Hogan's and all these other things, and how wrestling is popular, and the impact that Inoki had in the wrestling industry. So at the airport, in the baggage area, it was go. Now you had a translator, and you had the myself explaining these things. Inoki understood some English, and then the translator was translating to the rest of the people, and I threw my pitch. I said, wrestling is great. Wrestling is the most incredible thing and stuff. You can work with a Dan Severn and Main Event, and you can work with WCW and AAA and all these different groups and come together in the WWE and just do this thing. And my pitch worked. They said, yes, let's do it. So we came in, we started doing this, and then they brought in Bob Cartego, who worked for WWE. He was a local promoter, and so we started to organize a show. Now, I worked in the background from then on, and Jesse came in with the crew, and then the talent, and the ring, and even today, it's like the claim to fame that the Wrestling School of Hard Knock has from this event was the ring cover, the World Wrestling Peace Festival. The claim to fame that I have from this event was I did the program. But the words and the things that happened back and behind the scenes was what it took to make the show happen. Bringing in guys, bringing in the whole wrestling school of hard knocks, and bringing in these wrestlers to work these matches. And the opening matches they had, and they were great, and they performed. I think this was how, if I'm not mistaken, this is how Louis got his in with WCW. And then you had Conan, you had Rey Mysterio, you had Thunder Liger from Japan, you had all these other wrestlers, The Big Show, who was the Giant at the time, and you had a lot of wrestlers on this show, and all these wrestlers were doing one thing, auditioning for WCW. And that's when the luchadors and the cruiserweights came into WCW, and they became bigger and huger stars. Chris Jericho, all of these guys worked these shows, and they became successful after that event. And so those were one of those moments where you just have to look back and you say, it was the small people that made something happen and expanded the opportunities for the careers of some of the greats in this industry, some of the legends in this industry. And the World Wrestling Peace Festival was that platform for that. And we did promotions and radio and everything else like that and stuff. So it was cool. It was fun. It was exciting. It was good.
It was a fucking
It
tour
was
de
a lot.
force, holy shit.